move on from where we left off. There is so much here that I find that I have marked off several passages in the next 50, 60 pages, and it would be futile to try to read all of them or even half of them. So what I will try to do is, that will then mean just rushing through these passages. So instead of doing that, I will restrict the passages and maybe spend more time on fewer passages rather than indicate, read, rush through a large number of passages. That probably the compromise we'll have to make. So the passage that we just now read presents the nihilistic kind of attitude, critique of what Savitri proposes to do. And we have seen how effective the words of the god of death are in terms of the precision, the biting sarcasm, the basic inadequacy of human enterprise. As I said in the very beginning, in these 3-4 books, it's almost a miracle how Sri Aurobindo takes various intellectual positions, philosophical positions, and gives them a body and converts them into poetic passion, as it were, and makes them real in terms of poetic experience. Making a philosophic position feel real in terms of poetic experience is a very, very difficult thing. You can do it about human emotions, but about intellectual propositions, this is a very difficult job, and Sri Aurobindo has the capacity to do it. And very often I found that what someone like Shakespeare could do at the vital level, at the level of the vital beings, Shakespeare's characters are so varied and the characterization is so rich. Similarly, at another level, Sri Aurobindo shows the same kind of creativity, the same power that Shakespeare exhibited at some other level. Shakespeare was a great poet but worked at another level, and Sri Aurobindo has the same creativity, same mastery. And this, from that point of view, I guess these few books are quite a miracle. This is what we find. Now, we have seen Ashwapati, it's not the whole of it, but we have read a few lines from his statement of his position, why he wants Savitri to give up the enterprise. We'll read a few lines from Savitri, the kind of reply that she gives to this question, and then go on to something else. On page 588, I bow not to thee, O huge mask of death, black lie of night, to the cowed soul of man, unreal, inescapable end of things, thou grim jest played with the immortal spirit. Savitri hardly takes him seriously. He says, you are a jest, you are a big joke, she says, except that it's a grim joke. Thou grim jest played with the immortal spirit, conscious of immortality I walk, a victor spirit conscious of my force. Not as a suppliant to thy gates I came, unslain I have survived the clutches of night. My first strong grief moves not my seated mind, my unwept tears have turned to pearls of strength. I have transformed my ill-shaped brittle clay into the hardness of a statued soul. Now in the wrestling of the splendid gods, my spirit shall be obstinate and strong against the vast refusal of the world. I stoop not with this subject mob of minds who run to gleam with eager satisfied hands and pick from its mire mid many trampling feet its scornful small concessions to the weak. Mine is the labor of the battling gods, imposing on the slow reluctant ears the flaming will that reigns beyond the stars. They lay the law of mind on matter's works and win the soul's wish from earth's inconscient force. First, I demand whatever Satyavan, my husband, waking in the forest's charm out of his long, pure childhood's lonely dreams, desired and had not for his beautiful life. Give if thou must, if thou canst, refuse. Now this is in reply to the earlier statement which we didn't read, which God of Death makes. And she says to Savitri, you have come this far, you have shown great courage, great fortitude, great idealism. I am very pleased with you for this. So choose any boon you want and I can give it to you. Savitri says, I am not particular about any boons, but if you want to give any, this is what I want. My husband waking in the forest charm out of his long, pure childhood's lonely dreams, desired and had not for his beautiful life. Give if thou must, if thou canst, refuse. All that my husband must have missed as he was growing up. As you know, Jimatsena was blinded, he was living in exile and in the indigent circumstances of a hermitage. So he must have missed all this rich environment for his upbringing, for his growth, and restore all that. That's what he is saying. Restore to Jimatsena the lost empire, the kingdom that he has lost, the eyesight he has lost. If you can give this, that's all I need. I don't want anything for me. That's what she's saying. Then the God of Death, of course, grants to her this first boon. But Savitri says, world spirit, I was thy equal spirit born, page 589. My will too is law, my strength a god. I am immortal in my mortality. I tremble not before the immobile gaze of these unchanging marble hierarchies that look with the stone eyes of law and fate. My soul can meet them with its living fire. Out of thy shadow, give me back again into earth's flowering spaces Satyavan, in the sweet transiency of human limbs, to do with him my spirit's burning will. I will bear with him the ancient mother's load. I will follow with him earth's path that leads to God. Else shall the eternal spaces open to me, while round us strange horizons far recede, travelling together the immense unknown. For I, who have trod with him the tracks of time, can meet behind his steps whatever night or unimaginable stupendous dawn breaks up on our spirits in the untrod beyond. Wherever thou leadst his soul, I shall pursue. Wherever you take her, I will pursue. God of Death, he has an adversary who proves more than a match to him. There are wonderful passages here. As I told you, this particular 50, 60 pages are full of marvelous passages of great beauty and strength, both of two kinds. One is criticizing Savitri's enterprise, the other is justifying Savitri's enterprise. You have passages of both kinds. Take, for example, this passage, 591. Savitri, God of Death, at one point says, I am God. God of Death is the ultimate God. I, Death, created them out of my mind. All things I have built in them and I destroy. I made the worlds my net, each joy a mesh, a hunger amorous of its suffering prey, life that devours my image see in things. This eternal hunger that constantly devours, gobbles everything, that destroys everything, that negates everything, that is the ultimate God, that is me. And Savitri says, I don't know this God. Page 591, who is this God imagined by thy night, contemptuously creating worlds disdained, who made for vanity the brilliant stars? Not he who has reared his temple in my thoughts and made his sacred floor my human heart. My God is will and triumphs in his paths. My God is love and sweetly suffers all. To him I have offered hope for sacrifice and gave my longings as a sacrament. Later on she says, who shall prohibit or hedge in his course the wonderful, the charioteer, the swift? A few lines later he says, love's golden wings have power to fan thy void. The eyes of love gaze star-like through death's night. The feet of love tread naked, hardest worlds. He labors the depths, exults on the heights. He shall remake thy universe, O death. I have in me this power of love. And this power of love will remake the world. You have made your world. But this world will be eliminated and new world will be made. And that power which makes the new world, power of love, that is what I symbolize, that is what I have brought. Well, let us leave this book. This is one kind of a dialogue. You see, the God of death taking the position of a nihilist and Savitri arguing against this. The second kind of position the God of death takes is ridiculing all ideals. There are no ideals. Ideals are just, fancies, and a good example of that you find here on page 610. Let's begin end of 609. The God of death essentially saying all these great ideals are just empty words. People have come down with great missions trying to save the world, trying to bring succor, help, light to mankind. But nothing really has changed here. The world goes on as it always has been going on, with its load of suffering undiminished. And therefore he says, the avatars have lived and died in vain. Page 609. The avatars have lived and died in vain. That Bhagavan, this Bhagavan, they all come and disappear. Maybe a few people get some help towards salvation. But what about the human lot? The oppression, the exploitation, the hunger, the terror in the night, all these things have continued as always they have been. And the beating of the war drums, which is the one constant note you listen, you hear down the corridors of human history, that still hasn't been silenced. Now the war drums have a kind of muffled note. They are not, there are no world wars, but there are skirmishes all over. The suffering is still there. The avatars have lived and died in vain. Vain was the sage's thought, the prophet's voice. What did the sage get? How many people was he able to save? Any Mahatma, any avatar? How many people compared to the world's population? What has he done? In vain is seen the shining upward way. Earth lies unchanged beneath the circling sun. She loves her fall. This is a constant theme of the God of death. Man loves his ignorance. There is nothing you can do about it. She loves her fall, and no omnipotence her mortal imperfections can erase. Force on man's crooked ignorance, heaven's straight line, or colonize a world of death with gods. A few lines later, what is this? You are saying, I personify, I symbolize the great love. Love will recreate the world. What is this big thing called love? What is this love that thought has deified? You are making almost a god of this love. What is this love? This sacred legend and immortal myth. Don't you know? It's a conscious yearning of thy flesh. It's a glorious burning of thy nerves. This is all it is. And you give it some fancy name, call it love. And write poetry about it. Build Taj Mahals about it. What is this? It's a yearning of the flesh. It is nothing special to man. Animals also feel it. So it's all over. What is so special about this love? And you want me to be impressed because your basic argument seems to be love. That is no argument. It's a conscious yearning of thy flesh. It's a glorious burning of thy nerves. A rose of dream splendor petling thy mind. A great red rapture and torture of thy heart. A sudden transfiguration of thy days. I do admit, love is a madness that comes over people and suddenly transforms everything for a brief while. It passes and the world is as before. When you think you are in love, the world looks as if it is all colored with rainbow colors. But the funny thing about this is it doesn't stay for very long, it disappears. And once again, you begin to notice all the inadequacies, all the warts on the face. A ravishing edge of sweetness and of pain, a thrill in its yearning makes it seem divine. A golden bridge across the roar of the years, a cord tying thee to eternity. This is all people have said. This is what makes me eternal. You know what makes me eternal? I know I'm made of clay. I know I live a short period of time. But the capacity, the fact that I have this love in me, that makes me eternal. Our love is eternal. People have written poetry like this. And the God of Death says, and yet, how brief and frail. Love has a very frail constitution. Anything can break it. And even if the strongest, its duration is very brief. How soon is spent this treasure wasted by the gods on man, this happy closeness as of soul to soul, this honey of the body's companionship, this heightened joy, this ecstasy in the veins, this strange illumination of the sense. God of Death is never short of words. He can go on, he can mesmerize. If Satyavan had lived, this is sophistry of a supreme kind. He says, Savitri, let me tell you, you have to be grateful to me. Why? Because in the human world, love doesn't last very long. If Satyavan had lived, love would have died. Now before love died, I have taken away Satyavan, so you can live forever under the illusion that love is immortal. So he says, if Satyavan had lived, love would have died. But Satyavan is dead, and love shall live. You can write a few more poems about love. But even that, he doesn't grant. The English language and the master's command is such, this is only the end of a line, it's not the end of a sentence. You read that sentence a little more. But Satyavan is dead and love shall live. You don't anticipate the next line. a little while in thy sad breast. It will live, but how long? A little while in your sad breast, until his face and body fade on memory's wall, where other bodies, other faces come. Isn't this what's going on all the time? And then he writes a little novel, as it were, how people come together, fall in love, the transformation of the whole world. The whole world looks grand and beautiful, as if you are living in a paradise, and how gradually it cools off. Then the ardor is gone, the passion is gone. Then it's too late for you to withdraw, how it becomes a convenient arrangement. You do your things, I do my things. Gradually, even this becomes colder and colder. You hate each other, even sight, you despise each other. And yet, because of this, you still are forced to live in the same house. And then, he says, have you ever seen two dogs tied to a single leash? Have you ever seen that? Two dogs tied to a single leash. Perpetually they either bark at each other or try to pull in two different directions. Most marriages, most love end at that point. This is your love, and you want an elderly man like me, God of death, who has to look after the whole world, God's arrangement, to be swayed by things like this. How convincing, isn't it? When love breaks suddenly into the life, at first man steps into a world of the sun. When love breaks suddenly into your life, everything is sunny. In his passion he feels his heavenly element. But only a fine sunlit patch of earth, the marvelous aspect took of heaven's outburst. The snake is there and the worm in the heart of the rose. Right from the beginning, there is the snake, there is the worm in the heart of the rose. And he says, it doesn't take very much to destroy this fragile vase of love. Even a little breeze is enough to topple it, upset it. And he says, a word, a moment's act can slay the god. One wrong word uttered by either of the two, that is enough in many cases to destroy this magic, this enchantment. Precarious is his immortality. He says, I do. Even if he's immortal, it's a kind of precarious kind of immortality. Precarious is his immortality. He has 1,000 ways to suffer and die. Love can be destroyed 1,000 different ways and lead to 1,000 different hells. There may be only one heaven, but the hell that love frustrated can create are multifarious. Love cannot live by heavenly food alone. Only on sap of earth can it survive. Ultimately, how strong it is, how long it will last, will depend on how fat your salary packet is. It's as simple as that. You can't fan the fire of love by just reading out your poetry and showing your painting. To show what is it you have brought. So sap of earth is needed. For thy passion was a sensual want refined. After all, what is it? It is the animal sensual want. In man's case, it has become a little refined, that's all, a refinement. A hunger of the body and the heart. Thy want can tire and cease, or turn elsewhere. Or love may meet a dire and pitiless end by bitter treason or wrath with cruel wounds. Separate or thy unsatisfied will to others. Depart when first love's joy lies stripped and slain. A dull indifference replaces fire. Early days, it's fire in love. Gradually the fire gets cold, and that is replaced by indifference. A dull indifference replaces fire, or an endearing habit imitates love. You still keep calling her darling, dear, all that, but it doesn't mean anything. It is just a word. So endearing habit, just it's become a habit, so the habit continues. An outward and uneasy union lasts, or the routine of a life's compromise. Where once the seed of oneness had been cast into a semblance of spiritual ground by a divine adventure of heavenly powers. This is what love looked like. Ultimately what happens? Two strive. Constant associates without joy. Constant companions, but there is no joy left anymore in this companionship. Two egos straining in a single leash. The leash always reminds you of two growling dogs. So like two growling dogs tied to a single leash. Two egos straining in a single leash. Two minds divided by their jarring thoughts. Two spirits disjoined forever separate. Thus is the ideals falsified in man's world. Trivial or somber, disillusion comes. Life's harsh reality stares at the soul. Heavens are adjourned, flees into bodiless time. Savitri, I have saved you this entire story of despair by taking away Satyavan from you. Death saves thee from this and saves Satyavan. He now is safe, delivered from himself. He travels to silence and felicity. Call him not back to the treacheries of earth and the poor petty life of animal man. Don't call him back. What is it that the earth has to offer? What is it that you have to offer? This is, of course, Savitri's response, a fairly long one, is equally spirited. And by the time you have read that, you probably are converted to Savitri's viewpoint. So I was wondering whether if you read that, because if we did that, then we'll get stuck here. All right, let's read a few lines. Page 612. About 7-8 lines from the bottom. But Savitri replied to the dark power, a dangerous music now thou find'st, O death, meeting thy speech into harmonious pain, and flutest alluringly to tired hopes, the falsehoods mingled with sad strains of truth. You have, your music has lot of falsehood in it, but also there is some truth in what you are saying. You kind of very cleverly combine some strains of truth with a lot of falsehood. But I forbid thy voice to slay my soul. That's what the god of death really wants to do. By throwing cold water, by throwing all this sarcasm, he wants to slay, he wants to blunt her determination. But I forbid thy voice to slay my soul. He had said, love is basically a yearning of the flesh. It is something to do with the burning of the nerves. That's what he had said. Savitri says, my love is not a hunger of the heart. My love is not a craving of the flesh. It came to me from God. To God returns. Even in all that life and man have marred, a whisper of divinity still is heard. A breath is felt from the eternal spheres, allowed by heaven and wonderful to man. A sweet fire rhythm of passion chants to love. He says, love is what has saved mankind from utter damnation. All that ruin, all that misery, everything that you associate with man, history of man, I grant all these things. But the fact that man is still alive, still keeps hoping, suggests that something is still making life bearable. The entire human enterprise still looks tolerable. That is because somewhere, unseen by people, unsung by newspapers, there is this constant touch of love. There is this constant flow of love. That is what has kept us together. A sweet fire, there is a hope in its wild, infinite cry. It rings with callings from forgotten heights, and when its strains are hushed to the high-winged souls, in their empyrean its burning breath survives beyond the rapturous core of suns that flame forever pure in skies unseen, a voice of the eternal ecstasy. One day I shall behold my great sweet world, put off the dire disguises of the gods, unveil from terror and disrobe from sin. Page 614 continues, doesn't stop here. About 5 lines from the top. For we were man and woman from the first. Says Satyavan and Savitri says this. Our relationship didn't begin here in this life. We were man and woman from the first, the twin souls born from one undying fire. Did he not dawn on me in other stars? How has he through the thickets of the world pursued me like a lion in the night and come upon me suddenly in the ways and seized me with his glorious golden leap? This is such an impassioned line here. I would be quite surprised if we find anything comparable to this in anywhere in world literature. He says, Satyavan is not just my companion in this life. He has pursued me through several cycles of births, like what she describes it. How has he through the thickets of the world pursued me like a lion in the night and come upon me suddenly in the ways and seized me with his glorious golden leap. Unsatisfied, he yearned for me through time, sometimes with wrath and sometimes with sweet peace, desiring me since first the world began. He rose like a wild wave out of the floods and dragged me helpless into seas of bliss. Out of my curtained past, his arms arrive. They have touched me like the soft persuading wind. They have plucked me like a glad and trembling flower and clasped me happily burned in ruthless flame. I too have found him charmed in lovely forms and run delighted to his distant voice and pressed to him past many dreadful bars. If there is a yet happier, greater God, let him first wear the face of Satyavan. And let his soul be one with him, my love. So let him seek me that I may desire. For only one heart beats within my breast, and one God sits there enthroned. Advance, O death, beyond the phantom beauty of this world, for of its citizens I am not one. I cherish God the fire, not God the dream. Fire symbolizing purity, aspiration. I cherish God the fire, that's my God, and not God the dream. The God of death tries to show earlier on to Savitri that all these ideals that we talked about, they're all dreams, meaningless dreams. When you open your eyes and see reality, the dream has vanished and the ugly facts of life stare us into our face. He says, I cherish my God is not the God of God the dream. My God is God the fire, that which purifies, that which aspires, that which constantly burns upwards, the Agni of the Vedas, which always keeps mounting higher and higher. That's my God. My God and your God are two different gods. Then we move on to the next canto. As I said, we have just enough time for a few passages. It's better to read the passage through and talk about it a little bit rather than just mention a passage and rush on to the next one. So, Savitri now tries to explain to the God of death something that not many people seem to realize about this world. You see, all the imperfections this world has, Sri Aurobindo has seen them. You know, many people have the funny idea that what does Sri Aurobindo know about the ugliness of this world, of its limitations. He was in Pondicherry for 40 years. He must have forgotten how stupid, how limited the human being is. That's why he probably had these high hopes, dreams for mankind. You know, he didn't have any illusions about man. He sees man's future in spite of the fact he can see clearly man's past. But he can see much farther down the line, he can see much farther up into the future. And what he has seen has given him enough hope and certitude to declare that the world is not going to remain what it is. The perspective that allows Sri Aurobindo to do this is basically the evolutionary perspective. Today, man is bound by ignorance. Today, man is bound by death. Today, man is limited by desire, incapacity, disharmony. He doesn't deny any of these things. But to say that today he has these things is no argument that it will always be like this. Because this is an evolutionary world. To say, if we had the argument at one time, we could have said, the inconscient matter is the only reality about this world. There was a time, then there was not even a blade of grass on this earth. There was no life on this earth. All that you had on this earth is just matter. Stones, hills, without any form of life. But, lo and behold, after many millions of years, life blossomed in this wilderness. That itself is a first miracle. Then if somebody had said, well, this is not the whole of the story, this is only a beginning. There's going to come higher forms of life, more conscious forms of life, freer forms of life, like what? Oh, like the dinosaurs, like the horse, like the peacock, like the parrot, people wouldn't have believed that. But they also came. Then before man evolved, if somebody were to say that out of this animal world, whose joys and sorrows are limited to physical wants and their fulfillment, a creature is going to come who will write poetry, create music, wonderful forms of architecture, write Hamlet, Othello, create Beethoven's music, Keats's poetry, Kalidasa's Shakuntal. An animal doesn't understand any of these things. It has no taste for any of these things. No animal world has ever built any civilization, any culture. But if somebody were to have to tell somebody, look, from this, a new being is to come, a new being with a new kind of perfection, nobody would have believed that man either. Now very often, I develop it into a little story, getting the hint from the master himself, and many audiences have found this story fairly interesting. You may not be an exception, particularly as the lunch time approaches, people get hungry. It's a time for stories. The story is, a long time ago, before man appeared on this earth, there was a United Nations of monkeys. Well, I don't know, they probably didn't have a headquarters in New York. They probably had headquarters somewhere in Africa. And they met every year, several times. And there was a monkey representing India, maybe from Tamil Nadu. He was on the verge of retirement. He had served as a career diplomat. He had served in that for about 25-30 years. It was his last appearance in the United Nations General Assembly. And the usual proceedings began. The secretary from this country, the ambassador, the representative of country X spoke very brilliant English. He said, these are the problems that the ape world faces: disharmony, not enough to eat, wars, we must do something about it. Others clapped, some other monkey spoke. He listened quietly and then finally, sir, can I have a word? All right. He says, I have been coming here to this assembly for the last 25 years. And when I listen to these people, I feel as if I have heard the same speech 25 times. You're all making the same resolutions, making the same complaints, discussing the same problems. We haven't made any progress whatsoever. What do you suggest then? In my country, people have a belief that out of all these apes, one day, a new species is going to come. And he will be called man. What? The American representative there makes a phone call to Stanford and Harvard. Is there any research evidence to suggest man is going to come? Reply comes, no evidence whatsoever. So, somebody asks, what is this man? What will he be able to do? Oh, he says, man will build civilization, culture, poetry, music. You talk about culture, music, civilization to monkeys, what will they understand of it? This must be a very dull species. There is no jumping from trees to trees. There is no, this nice long tail that we have, so beautiful. We are not interested. You please sit down. Then another monkey says, I am a pragmatic monkey. I don't want vague answers, vague questions. This chap from India is always talking in vague terms. I want a precise answer. I have a precise question. What is it? The question is, during the last Monkey Olympics, The highest broad jump recorded was 35 feet 6 inches. One monkey jumped from one tree to another tree, which is 35 feet 6 inches. Suppose we become human, will we be able to jump from one tree to another, which is 40 feet apart? If we can do that, I would regard being human is a worthwhile enterprise. Because so far we have been able to jump 35 feet. Can we jump 40 feet? I would like a yes or no answer. No, nothing vague from the representative from India. I assure you, when you become man, you will be able to jump from New Delhi to New York in one hop. New Delhi to New York. Unbelievable. Please ask him to sit down. This is absolute nonsense. That's what Sri Aurobindo has been saying. I assure you, you will be able to walk this earth like gods. And what have you been saying? Impossible, unbelievable. That's what Savitri is going to say to God of Death. We'll come back to it after the break.